15. Raid. Knox peered through the mist. Days of waiting and preparation for this raid on Beryl all culminated tonight. The oblong moons, half-shadowed, remained hidden behind a thick bank of cloud cover, the only light emanating from the fires and torches of the Tamoshin camp. Patrols spawned moving shadows that curled and twisted as they passed. The teams were moving into position, and to their credit, he couldn't pick out a misplaced sound or flicker of motion. He swallowed a little easier. They were to hit targets based on priority. Food and essentials first, and then a craft to transport it all in. He scanned the clearing one last time. Sky be with us. He sucked in a long breath and pulled on his strength. A flush of power flooded through him, lighting his nerve endings afire, and he crouched to the ready. The doubled call of the small gray owl sounded. Team 1 was ready. An answering hoot confirmed Team 2. He waited in the following silence, eyeing the patrolmen nearest him. They paid the sounds no attention. The soft warble of a night thrush sang. Team 3. His hand tightened around the gnarled root. He'd been offered his choice of weapon, but had opted for the club. The piece of wood felt comfortable in his hand. As nonsensical as it sounded, it felt like a gift from the sky, and he wanted her blessing tonight. The answering trill of a thrush returned. Team 4. He glanced at the black of the night sky above him as the soft chirp of a cricket met his ear. Team 5 had arrived. Power tingled through his limbs, the rush of potential aching in his cells, and he launched himself into the sky with a forceful jump. The cool air stung his eyes, and he blinked away the forming moisture, taking in the landscape at a glance. The enemy camp stretched wide, outlined by ember-lit cookfires and blazing torches. Rows of tents extended out from the cluster itself like long, tentacled fingers, tripling the size of Beryl. The tents represented a formidable invasion force, even without accounting for the troops that had already moved into nearby clusters. Knox shifted his focus back to the ground beneath him. Everything hinged on him being able to clear the way without sounding the alarm. Despite his bravado with the first Tamoshin patrol he'd met, he couldn't take on this army alone. His feet hit the ground between two soldiers and absorbed the shock by crouching low. With lightning speed, he swung the root into the back of the first man's head. Not waiting for him to crumple, Knox spun to his stunned companion and took him in the jaw. Both men fell, their deaths silent but for the dull thud of wood against bone. Adrenaline had his heart pounding in his ears as he paused. No shouts sounded, no alarms. Only the quiet murmur of voices at the next fire. He moved through the shadows until he could see the three men warming themselves, looking out into the night. He hooked the club to his belt and stepped into the ring of light and greeted the group in Tamoshin. The trio turned to his voice, surprised but not alarmed. A lilting phrase came back at him, and it took a moment to unravel the words. Am I their replacement? He was close enough. He didn't bother trying to form an answer and instead stepped fully into the light. Detached, he noted the expressions of the men change from ease to curiosity to concern. Before terror could fully form, they lay dead at his feet. From within the tree line, two figures emerged. Kryn and a woman named Ven. "Good work, overseer," said Kryn in his thick brogue as he rolled one of the patrolmen over and began unbuckling his armor chestplate. Ven followed suit with the smallest of the three dead men. "By the end of the night, I hope it will be," Knox said, taking in the dead bodies around him, a sour taste creeping up his throat. Necessary deaths, but empty. "Let's drag them into the brush." Kryn nodded as he fastened the stolen armor over his chest. Ven pulled on a new pair of boots before joining his effort to cover their tracks. Once finished, they slipped into Beryl. Ven led the way, expertly navigating into the heart of the cluster. They ran across one patrol group, and Knox made quick work of the surprised Tamoshins. The storehouse was an impressive structure on short but thick stilted legs. Heavy timber beams supported the floor. Every cluster gathered emergency rations, a percentage of a cluster's crops, as communal insurance. Any excess in the spring was sold off and the profits shared. This stockpile was a cluster's lifeline, and Beryl's storehouse was no different. Dovetailed logs locked together, forming impressive walls with reinforced doors barring the solitary entrance. The enemy apparently valued the hoard as much as the citizens of Beryl. 6 impressive-looking guards stood in steel-faced resolve along an earthen ramp leading up to the doors. Nox motioned to Kryn and Ven to hold before darting across a narrow street and into the shadow of the large building. The rough wood of the piles pulled at the fabric of his top as he pressed flush with the wall, listening. The night remained still. The double hoot of an owl signaled Team 2 was in position. As soon as the building was secured, they would come in to help transport the supplies out. Reaching the front corner of the storehouse, Nox hazarded a quick look. The guards stood in a rough V formation before the door. The 2 closest to the building were armed with the upgraded bolts he had faced with the patrol. He bit his cheek in thought. The bolt throwers were not quiet when discharged, and if he drew fire, the whole camp would be on them. He tucked the end of his club into his belt and crouched, searching the ground with his fingertips. He and Terran used to hunt small game this way, but he had never had a reason to try it on an armored man. Overseers were judges, not assassins. When a judge meted out punishment, you saw it coming. Tonight was different. He played the executioner, and death had to be dealt in silence. Finding several suitably sized stones, he stood and eased away from the wall. Palming the rock, he eyed the guard holding the bolt farthest from him. With a pull on his power, he flicked his hand forward with supernatural speed. The stone struck true, and in the low light a spray of blood erupted from the guard's throat. The man clutched at the wound with a muted gurgle and fell to his knees. As Nox hoped, the others turned to their fallen comrade in confusion. In quick succession, he sent 2 more stones flying. The guard crouching next to the injured man collapsed sideways, a crimson stain at his temple. The others didn't even notice as the other bolt-wielding guard fell forward, the final rock tearing through the top of his spine and out his windpipe. Not waiting for the others to make sense of what was happening, he jumped into the clearing and let his club do its work. In less time than it had taken for him to maneuver into position, all 6 guards lay dead. A thrill of satisfaction coursed through him. The half-crushed face of the guard at his feet stared up accusingly at him with one unseeing eye, and satisfaction gave way to a twisting weight in his gut. Kryn helped him move the bodies to the shadows, while Ven gave a quiet owl call. A few moments later, Syracuse and his partner Mardell emerged from the shadows. They, too, wore the armor from the patrols they'd removed, quietly taking up the guard positions before the storehouse. Kryn and Ven disappeared inside, and Nox moved closer to Syracuse. "Any trouble coming in? None we didn't expect?" Nox nodded. The armor alone indicated they had left no loose ends. Syracuse eyed the dark stains visible on the hard-packed earth, a dark joy lighting his eyes. "Looks like you cleared the Tumultian scuttle with little trouble." Nox's mouth pressed tight. Violence had forged these boys to men, and they reflected the same satisfaction he'd felt only moments earlier. It made him cringe. They need more than revenge to guide them. He needed to show them another way, like Solace had done for him. "Not scuttle." He gestured at the earth Syracuse was gloating over. "Men." He emphasized the word and held the young man with a look. "They didn't treat your cluster with such dignity. Don't lower yourself by doing the same." Mardell scoffed. "What's the difference? Dead is dead." Nox let his gaze flick to the other young man, trying for all the world to look relaxed, but he could see a tremor in his hands and hear the waver in his voice. "You're right. There is no difference to the dead. The difference is in the cost to your soul. Don't debase yourself by devaluing life." It was a fine line to fight an invading force while holding room for their humanity. The young man shuffled their feet, but nodded at his words. Once they are ready inside, take Mardell and rendezvous with Teams 4 and 5. If they have a craft, bring it to Position 1, he reminded Syracuse. Who can count on us? Knox gave them both a tight smile. I know I can. Stay alert, there may be patrols I've missed. We won't let any one get by us, Syracuse assured. Knox noted the catch. Good. I'll meet you back at 1. A thought occurred to him, and he added, If I'm not there before first light, don't wait. Get those supplies back to the camp. Syracuse stiffened and opened his mouth to argue. Knox put his hand on the boy's shoulder. I'm counting on you to keep the others on plan. The argument died unspoken. Yes, Overseer. Knox gave a tight smile. Thank you. He turned to Mardell. Alert the next team, I'm on my way. The sound of a thrush trilled in the night. Knox met the next team a few streets over, where the residences had been turned into barracks. Nearly as urgent as food stores, the refugees of Beryl needed essential supplies, clothing, blankets, cookware. Unfortunately, these items were not all stored in one place. This team was made up of 3 of the most fit from the group, 2 women who were a few years older than Syracuse, and an older man. Elio had a willowy frame and moved with a fluid grace. A short woman, Bonnie, exuded strength. She reminded him of Taryn, her every movement sure and confident. The man, Harrod, despite his years, was their best scout and knew the placement of enemy troops better than anyone. This way, Overseer, Harrod whispered, dipping his head in respect as Knox walked up. This row is mostly used for officer barracks. There should be less resistance. Lead on, Knox said, hearing the unspoken subtext. Less resistance, as in fewer to kill. His mind recoiled at the thought of the executions before him, even as a fresh burst of strength flooded his veins. The fatigue he'd been feeling washed away, and he sucked in a long breath, steeling himself. Harrod stopped by the first of the houses and tipped his chin to the ladder which led to the back door. Elio and Bonnie trailed after him, silent as the shadows, their expressions as dark as the night around them. With quiet efficiency, he passed through the house like a plague of death, snuffing out each life methodically. Both women carried thin knives in case they were surprised while they collected the essentials. He made sure neither had to use them. Home after home took on a bloody hue as they collected what they needed. Overseer, we have everything we can carry. The transport crates are almost overflowing, Harrod whispered when they reached the edge of the street. Knox's whole body flushed cold with relief as he released his strength. Beads of sweat dripped from his hairline. He wiped his forehead into his sleeve to stave off the inevitable chill that was sure to follow. Excellent. Take what we have and meet the others. Harrod didn't move, but instead crossed his arms and raised an unkempt eyebrow. The man had watched him slaughter the enemy in cold blood, but showed no hesitation in questioning him. And what do you intend, Overseer? I have further business. Knox met the older man's eyes with a firm look. Harrod didn't flinch, but held his gaze, pushing the silent question. Knox heaved a sigh. I need to get a closer look at this army. Harrod nodded, accepting the explanation. Good sense. Carrying on alone, less so. Elio cocked her head to the conversation. I would join you. Bonnie and Harrod can manage the supplies on their own. We can, Bonnie said. Knox frowned, thinking of a way to politely explain the hindrance her offer would ultimately be. You can't follow me. I'm going into the council hall. Elio stifled a soft gasp, and Harrod scowled. That's foolishness, he spat. The Tumultian Command has their personal troops housed there. Don't underestimate them, Overseer, Bonnie said, her grim expression holding a raw pain. Hadi, her voice gave out, and Harrod intervened. She may have been young, but she was an exceptional overseer. Harrod gestured between them, as if their skill was explanation enough. There was no way the Tumultians should have been able to hold her, yet we saw her subdued and sacrificed to the tumult, as if she held no strength in her body. The bolt weapons? Knox asked. Elio shook her head, her long hair swishing in agreement.
It would have to be something more substantial. Even I can withstand a bolt or two without losing consciousness.
Nox couldn't keep the flicker of surprise from pulling at his eyebrow. Elio's jaw flexed and her chin tipped up at his response.
They began training us as soon as she joined our cluster. She was thorough.
I see, he conceded.
Do you know what incapacitated her?
The three shared a look before Harrod cleared his throat.
We don't. We've been searching, but so far we have no answers.
Which is exactly why I need to go, Nox said. We're moving blind. There is more to this invasion than Beryl, unfortunately, and we need better information to provide the order.
But to risk yourself,
Bonnie protested. Is the heart of my oath, Nox said with finality. It was met by another exaggerated pause from the team.
You need to take this road,
Harrod finally said as he gestured south.
It leads to the council chambers.
It does, he confirmed.
We will return the way we came. It will be easier to stay out of sight.
Good, Nox said.
Tell Syracuse to leave as soon as everything is loaded. I'll follow on foot.
Elio and Bonnie stiffened at the order, but to his relief relented a moment later and followed Harrod back the way they came. In truth, he wished he could bring them along. They were skilled, and backup would be welcome, but his conscience couldn't put any more lives on the altar of his plans tonight.